My wife had an affair with my uncle. When I found out, my world collapsed. Now she wants me to pay for their kid. The paternity test results arrived on a Tuesday at 11:23 a.m., delivered by a courier who had no idea he was handing me a bomb disguised as a manila envelope. I didn't open it immediately. I sat in my home office, the small converted bedroom where I'd spent countless late nights building my graphic design business while my wife Jessica slept soundly down the hall, and stared at that envelope for 17 minutes. My hands didn't shake. Something had already crystallized inside me weeks ago when Jessica announced her pregnancy at my parents' 40th anniversary dinner. The way my uncle Marcus had choked on his wine. The way Jessica's hand had instinctively moved toward him before catching herself. The way my mother's smile had frozen, just for a fraction of a second, before she rushed forward with congratulations. I'd been married to Jessica for 8 years. We'd been trying for a baby for the last 3, or at least I thought we had been. She'd blamed the stress of her marketing job, her irregular cycles, my travel schedule for client meetings. I'd believed every word, supported every doctor's appointment, held her hand through every negative pregnancy test. What a fool I had been. Uncle Marcus was my father's younger brother, 52 years old to my 34. He'd never married, always the charming bachelor at family gatherings, the cool uncle who drove a Corvette and dated women half his age. He lived in the guest house on my parents' property, an arrangement that had started temporarily after his divorce 15 years ago and somehow became permanent. The announcement had happened during dessert. Jessica had stood up, radiant in a yellow sundress I'd bought her for our anniversary, and clinked her glass with a spoon. "David and I have some wonderful news to share," she'd said, her hand finding mine. "We're finally pregnant." 12 weeks along, the room had erupted. My mother cried. My father clapped me on the back hard enough to leave a mark. My sister Emma squealed and immediately started planning a baby shower. And I had smiled, genuinely smiled, because this was everything we'd supposedly wanted. But I'd been watching Marcus. I always watched Marcus at family functions. Had been for years, actually, because something about the way he looked at my wife had never quite sat right with me. That night, I saw his face cycle through shock, panic, and then forced joy in the span of 3 seconds. That's when I knew. I didn't confront anyone that night. I didn't make a scene. I drove Jessica home, told her how happy I was, made love to her gently because she said the baby made her tired. And then, while she slept, I sat in the darkness of our living room and did the math. 12 weeks ago, I'd been in Portland for a week-long conference, pitching my design services to a tech startup that would later become my biggest client. Jessica had stayed home, said she had an important campaign launch. Marcus had texted me during that week, unusual for him, asking casual questions about my trip, when I'd be back, how the pitch was going. The next morning, I'd called a private investigator. Her name was Sharon Mitchell, a 45-year-old former cop with steel gray hair and eyes that had seen everything. I gave her 3 months and an unlimited budget. "I need to know the truth," I'd told her in her sparse office downtown. "Every detail, every meeting, every lie. Can you do that?" Sharon had looked at me with something like sympathy. "Mr. Chen, in 30 years doing this work, I've never had someone come to me this calm about suspected infidelity." "You already know, don't you?" "I know enough," I'd replied. "I need to know everything." Now, sitting with the paternity test results, obtained from a sample I'd collected from Jessica's water glass and a cigarette butt Marcus had left at our last family barbecue, I finally had my answer. I opened the envelope. The technical language blurred together until I found the conclusion. Probability of paternity, 99.97%. Marcus was the father. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't punch the wall or throw my computer through the window. Instead, I opened the file Sharon had delivered the previous week, a 147-page document she'd titled The Complete Picture. It was time to read every word. Act 2, The Discovery. Sharon's report was devastatingly thorough. The affair had started 2 years ago, not 3 months. 2 years of family dinners where they'd smiled at me across the table. 2 years of Christmas mornings and Thanksgiving prayers. 2 years of Jessica climbing into bed beside me after, I now understood, coming from his arms. It had begun, according to phone records and credit card statements Sharon had legally obtained through her investigative channels. During a girls' weekend Jessica claimed she'd taken to Napa Valley. She'd actually stayed at the Cliffside Inn, a boutique hotel in Mendocino, in room 217. Marcus had checked in 2 hours after her, room 219. Adjoining rooms. The photographs Sharon had obtained from that weekend were clinical but damning. Marcus and Jessica having dinner on the hotel terrace, walking on the beach holding hands, entering his room at 9:47 p.m. Jessica leaving at 6:23 a.m. From there, the timeline became a catalog of my humiliation. They'd met every month, sometimes twice, always when I was away on business or visiting my elderly grandmother in Sacramento. Visits Jessica always claimed she couldn't attend due to work commitments. They'd spent a weekend in Seattle. She'd told me it was a marketing conference. 4 days in Lake Tahoe, supposedly a solo wellness retreat. A week in Hawaii where she'd told me she was helping her sister through a divorce. A sister who was happily married and confused when I later called to thank her for supporting Jessica. But the worst part wasn't the affair itself. It was the money. Marcus had been unemployed for 6 years, living off my parents' generosity and, apparently, stealing from their accounts. Sharon had uncovered $73,000 in fraudulent transfers from my parents' savings to Marcus's personal account over the past 4 years. Small amounts, $1,500 here, $2,000 there, carefully timed to avoid suspicion. He'd spent that money on Jessica. Designer handbags, she'd told me, came from sales. Jewelry, she'd claimed, were costume pieces. The all-expenses-paid trips. Every romantic gesture he'd made to my wife had been funded by stealing from his own elderly brother. My parents, retired teachers living on Social Security and their pension, had $127,000 left in their savings. They'd planned to use it for medical expenses as they aged, maybe leave something for their grandchildren. Marcus had been slowly bleeding them dry to romance my wife. I sat with this knowledge for 3 days, moving through my normal routine like an actor in a play. I made Jessica breakfast. I asked about her day. I felt the baby kick for the first time and told her it was miraculous, which in a horrible way it was. On the 4th day, Sharon called me. "There's something else," she said. "Are you sitting down?" I was in my car, parked outside the grocery store where I'd just bought ingredients for the dinner Jessica had requested. "What is it?" "Your wife has been telling Marcus the baby is definitely his, but she's also told him she hasn't been intimate with you in months." The steering wheel creaked under my grip. "That's a lie. We've been together regularly. I know. I have evidence that contradicts her timeline. Mr. Chen, I think she's been playing both of you. The pregnancy was likely an attempt to lock down whoever would give her the better life. Based on her text messages to her friend Amanda, she didn't expect Marcus to actually want to be involved. She thought she could pass the baby off as yours and continue the affair without consequences. But Marcus does want to be involved. Very much so. He's been pressuring her to leave you. He thinks he's in love. He's been looking at apartments, researching custody rights even though he's broke. Your wife has been stalling him, and based on her messages, she's panicking." I thanked Sharon and sat in that parking lot for an hour, watching families come and go, loading groceries into their cars, children laughing in shopping carts. Normal people living normal lives, not sitting in the wreckage of everything they built. That's when I decided I wouldn't just leave. I wouldn't just divorce her and cut them out. That would be too easy, too clean. They'd made a fool of me for 2 years. They'd stolen from my parents, lied to my family, and planned to trap me into raising another man's child. They wanted to play games? I'd show them how the game was really played. I called Sharon back. "I need you to do something for me. Name it. Find out everything you can about Marcus's financial situation. Every debt, every obligation, every penny he owes. And I need you to find me a good lawyer who specializes in elder financial abuse. You're going after him for stealing from your parents, among other things. How long will it take? I can have the financial breakdown in 48 hours. The lawyer, I know someone. Catherine Webb, she's a shark. She'll take this case pro bono if there's elder abuse involved. It's her specialty. Set up a meeting. And Sharon, keep investigating. I want to know every detail of their plans, every conversation. I need to be ready for whatever comes next. You're not going to confront them yet? No, I said, starting my car and pulling out of the parking lot. I'm going to let them think they've won. People make mistakes when they think they're safe. Over the next 6 weeks, I became a ghost in my own life. I smiled. I attended prenatal appointments. I painted the nursery the soft green Jessica wanted. I had Sunday dinner at my parents' house and watched Marcus joke with my father, accept my mother's affection, meet my eyes across the table with what he probably thought was subtle triumph. I documented everything. I recorded conversations gull in our state with single-party consent. I kept copies of every financial record. I took photographs of Marcus's car parked outside our house on days I was supposed to be gone but had doubled back. Jessica grew more distant as her pregnancy advanced. She stopped initiating physical intimacy. She snapped at small things. She spent hours on her phone, always angling it away from me. When I asked if everything was okay, she blamed hormones and exhaustion. "I'm just scared," she'd said one night, tears in her eyes that might have been genuine. "What if I'm a terrible mother? What if everything changes between us?" "Everything has already changed," I'd replied, meaning it in ways she couldn't understand. "But we'll face it together." The lie tasted like acid, but I swallowed it down. During this time, I also made some changes of my own. I consolidated our finances, moving money into accounts only in my name. I secured the intellectual property rights to all my design work, officially incorporating my business and transferring all assets into the corporate entity. I changed the beneficiary on my life insurance. I documented every asset we'd acquired during our marriage and their sources of funding. Spoiler alert, almost everything had been purchased with money I'd earned. Jessica had always been dismissive of my work. Graphic design, she'd say with a little laugh at parties, it's like making pretty pictures on a computer. She had no idea my client list included 3 Fortune 500 companies and that I'd been pulling in $340,000 a year for the last 18 months. She knew I made decent money, enough for our comfortable 3-bedroom house in a good neighborhood and regular vacations. She didn't know I'd been saving and investing aggressively, building wealth while she spent freely. She definitely didn't know about the $680,000 sitting in my investment accounts or the fact that I owned our house outright, having paid off the mortgage with a windfall from a major contract. I'd been raised by parents who'd lived through poverty. I saved obsessively. I planned for worst-case scenarios. I built safety nets. Thank God I had. The breaking point came on a Thursday evening in my 7th month of playing this role. I came home early from a client meeting and heard Jessica on the phone in our bedroom, door closed. "I can't keep doing this, Marcus. He's going to find out eventually. We need to wait until after the baby is born." Silence as he responded. "Because I need the health insurance." Do you have any idea how expensive childbirth is? And what about maternity leave? "My company will give me 12 weeks paid, but only if I'm married and the baby is." She stopped, listening. "No, I haven't told him anything. He thinks everything is fine. He's already talking about college funds and family vacations. It's pathetic." I stood in the hallway recording every word on my phone and felt the last thread of my hesitation snap. "Look, I'll leave him eventually, okay? But I need to do this smart. He's not going to take this well, and I need to protect myself financially. He has assets. I'm entitled to half in a divorce. If we just wait a few more months, She was planning to take me for everything she could. After everything else, she thought she could rob me on her way out the door to my uncle. That night, I made the final preparations. I called my parents and told them I needed to have a serious family meeting. I contacted Catherine Webb and confirmed our strategy. I reached out to my sister Emma and asked her to trust me, to be at my parents' house on Sunday at 2 p.m. "What's this about?" Emma had asked. "The truth," I'd replied. Finally, the truth. Act 3. The Strategic Revenge. Sunday arrived with the kind of perfect autumn weather that felt like mockery. Clear blue skies, golden leaves drifting from the oak tree in my parents' yard, the smell of my mother's famous pot roast drifting from the kitchen. Jessica had been reluctant to attend family dinner. "I'm not feeling well," she'd complained that morning, hand on her swollen belly. "Can't we skip this week?" "My mom is really looking forward to it," I'd said mildly, loading her prenatal vitamins into my pocket. "Besides, she wants to show you the baby blanket she finished. It would mean a lot to her." Guilt was such an easy weapon to wield. We arrived at 1:45 p.m. Marcus's Corvette was already there, parked in its usual spot. Emma's SUV pulled up minutes after us. And then, at exactly 2 p.m., Sharon Mitchell's Honda appeared, followed by Catherine Webb's sleek black Tesla. Jessica noticed them immediately. "Who are those people?" "Friends," I said simply, helping her out of the car with exaggerated care. "They're here to help with something." Inside, my parents were confused but welcoming. My mother had set the dining room table for 7. She'd been expecting just family. Now there were 9 of us crowding into the living room. Marcus was lounging in my father's recliner, beer in hand, looking every bit the comfortable family member. He raised his bottle to me in greeting. "Hey, nephew. How's it going?" "It's going to be an interesting afternoon, Uncle Marcus," I replied, and something in my tone made his smile falter. I'd prepared a presentation. In my profession, I knew the power of good visuals. I set up my laptop and connected it to my parents' TV, a large screen I'd bought them last Christmas. "What's all this about, David?" my father asked, settling onto the couch next to my mother. Emma sat perched on the arm of their chair, looking between me and Jessica with growing concern. For the past 7 months, I began, standing in front of the TV with the remote in my hand, I've been investigating a crime. Actually, multiple crimes. I wanted to have all the facts before I brought this to everyone's attention. Jessica had gone pale. "David, what are you doing?" Telling the truth. Finally, I clicked the remote. The first image appeared on the screen, a timeline, color-coded and detailed. This is a timeline of my wife Jessica's affair with my Uncle Marcus. It began 2 years, 3 months, and 17 days ago. The room exploded. My mother gasped. My father stood up. Emma said, "Oh my God." Marcus dropped his beer bottle, and the foam spread across my parents' carpet. "David, stop," Jessica started, but I held up my hand. "We're going to get through this systematically. Everyone will have a chance to speak. But first, you're going to listen." "Sharon," I gestured to the investigator, who stood up with her own folder. "My name is Sharon Mitchell. I'm a licensed private investigator. Over the past 7 months, I've compiled evidence of an ongoing extramarital affair between Jessica Chen and Marcus Chen. This evidence includes hotel receipts, photographs, phone records, and text messages obtained through legal means." She began placing printed photographs on the coffee table. Marcus and Jessica at the Cliffside Inn, holding hands on a beach in Hawaii, kissing in the parking lot of a restaurant in Seattle. Each image was time-stamped and dated. Jessica was crying now, but they were angry tears. "You had me followed? You had us investigated?" "That's crazy, David. That's necessary," I finished. "Because you've been lying to me for 2 years. You've been sleeping with my uncle. And you're carrying his child." My mother made it sound like she'd been punched. My father's face had turned the deep red that meant his blood pressure was spiking. I moved to his side, placed a hand on his shoulder. "Dad, I need you to stay calm. There's more, and it gets worse." "Worse?" he choked out. "How could it possibly be worse?" I clicked to the next slide, bank statements, highlighted and annotated. "Marcus has been stealing from you. Over the past 4 years, he's transferred $73,000 from your joint savings account into his personal account. Small amounts, timed carefully, always with fake explanations. He's been using your money you saved from 40 years of teaching, to fund his affair with my wife." The silence that followed was absolute. Even Jessica stopped crying. My father turned slowly to look at his brother. "Marcus?" Marcus had recovered some of his composure, but his face was white. "That's not. Those were loans. You told me I could borrow money when I needed it." "Did I?" My father's voice was dangerously soft. "Did I tell you that you could borrow $73,000 without asking? Without telling me?" Catherine Webb stood up now, all business in her sharp suit. "Mr. and Mrs. Chen, my name is Catherine Webb, and I specialize in elder financial abuse cases. What Marcus has done constitutes theft and could potentially be prosecuted as a felony, given the amounts involved and his position of trust within your family. I've prepared the necessary paperwork if you choose to pursue legal action." "Legal action?" Marcus finally stood, looking panicked. "You're going to call the police on me? On family?" "You stopped being family when you fucked my wife," I said flatly, and my mother flinched at the language but didn't correct me. "You stopped being family when you stole from your own brother. And you definitely stopped being family when you conspired with Jessica to trap me into raising your child." "It's not like that," Jessica tried, but Emma cut her off. "How could you?" My sister's voice was shaking. "How could you do this to David? He loves you. He's been planning for this baby, buying things, reading parenting books. I've watched him become so excited to be a father, and all along it wasn't even his child?" Jessica turned on her, defensive. "You don't understand. David's always so focused on his work, his clients, his precious design projects. He never made time for me. I was lonely." "So you fucked his uncle?" Emma's voice dripped with disgust. "You're disgusting. Both of you are disgusting." I clicked to the next slide, text message, transcripts. "For the record, Jessica, you texted your friend Amanda, these are dated, that I was adequate in bed, that our marriage was fine enough, and that you stayed with me because I was stable and would make a good provider. You weren't lonely. You were bored. You wanted excitement. And Marcus was convenient. This is private," Jessica started, but I rolled over her. "You gave up the right to privacy when you lied to me about paternity. Actually, let's talk about that." I pulled the envelope from my pocket. "This is a DNA test proving that Marcus is the biological father of your baby. I had it expedited. The results are conclusive." I handed the document to my father, who stared at it like it was written in a foreign language. "Here's what's going to happen now," I continued, my voice level and calm despite the chaos in my chest. "Jessica, I'm filing for divorce. My lawyer has already prepared the papers. Because you committed adultery and fraud, you're not entitled to spousal support. Our prenuptial agreement, which you apparently forgot about, stipulates that in cases of infidelity, you leave the marriage with whatever assets you brought into it. That would be your car and your personal items. Everything else, including our house, was purchased with income I earned or inherited from my grandmother." "Prenup?" Jessica looked genuinely confused. "We didn't sign a prenup." "Yes, we did. 3 days before the wedding. You signed it at the lawyer's office, remember? You were hungover from your bachelorette party and barely read it. I had Sharon hand her a copy. Page 7, Section 12. Infidelity clause." Jessica's hands shook as she flipped through the pages, and I watched the moment she realized I was right. We had signed a prenup. She'd been so excited about the wedding, so confident in our future, that she'd barely glanced at the legal document her generous fiancé had asked her to sign. "As for you, Marcus," I turned to my uncle, "my parents will decide how to handle the theft. But I have some information you might find relevant." "Do you remember Angela Winters?" Marcus went, if possible, even paler. Who? Angela Winters. You dated her 3 years ago. She broke up with you after 6 months. Do you remember why? We were incompatible, he muttered. She broke up with you because she found out you'd been stealing from her. Small amounts from her purse, $40 here, $60 there. Her credit card for unauthorized purchases. She didn't report it because she felt sorry for you, thought you were going through a hard time after your divorce. I clicked to another slide, a police report. But I found Angela, and she's willing to testify about your pattern of theft if this goes to court. Combined with what you did to my parents, a prosecutor would have a very strong case. Marcus sat down heavily. You can't do this. I'm not doing anything. You did this. Every choice, every lie, every betrayal, that was you. My mother was crying now, and my father had his arm around her. Emma was staring at Marcus like she'd never seen him before. Jessica was still flipping through the prenup, apparently in shock. Sharon spoke up again. There's one more thing. Jessica, you might want to know that Marcus has been communicating with another woman. Her name is Denise. They've been texting for the past 6 weeks. He's been telling her that he's about to be free from a complicated situation and they can finally be together. The look Jessica turned on Marcus was pure poison. What? It's not. She's just a friend, Marcus stammered. I have the text messages, Sharon said calmly. They're quite explicit. He's been sleeping with her since mid-August, so even in their affair, Marcus had been cheating. The irony was almost funny. Jessica stood up, shaking. You bastard. You told me you loved me. You said we'd be a family. We can still. You were cheating on me while I'm pregnant with your child. Her voice was climbing toward hysteria. You convinced me to betray my husband, to risk everything. And you were fucking someone else? You're one to talk about betrayal, I pointed out mildly. You were sleeping with both me and him right up until last week. Jessica turned on me, her face twisted with rage and desperation. You don't understand. I love him. I love Marcus. This baby was supposed to be our fresh start. No, I said, and my voice was harder now. This baby was supposed to be your meal ticket. You told Amanda in a text dated September 3rd that you'd keep David on the hook until after the birth so you could secure child support from whoever stepped up. You were playing both of us, Jessica. You just didn't expect to get caught. My mother stood up abruptly. I think Marcus needs to leave. Right now, Mom, Marcus started, but my father cut him off. Your mother asked you to leave. Get out of our house, but I live here. Not anymore, you don't. My father's voice was like iron. You have until tomorrow morning to get your things out of the guest house. After that, we're changing the locks, and if you come back, I'll call the police. You're kicking me out? I'm your brother. My brother wouldn't have done any of this. I don't know who you are. My father's eyes were wet, and that might have been the worst thing I'd witnessed all day, my strong, stoic father crying over his brother's betrayal. Marcus looked around the room, searching for an ally and finding none. Finally, he grabbed his jacket and left, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the pictures on the wall. Jessica was still standing in the middle of the room, holding the prenup, tears streaming down her face. What am I supposed to do? I'm 7 months pregnant. That's not my problem, I said, and I meant it. You'll figure it out. Maybe Marcus will step up. Maybe Denise will be understanding. Or maybe you'll have to face the consequences of your choices alone. David, please. No. We're done. I'll have my lawyer contact you about the divorce proceedings. I want you out of the house by the end of the week. You can stay with your parents or a friend. I honestly don't care. You can't just throw me out. I have rights. Catherine Webb stepped forward. Actually, Mrs. Chen, because Mr. Chen owns the house outright and you've committed adultery, you have very limited rights. I'd suggest you hire a lawyer, but given your financial situation, you might want to look into legal aid. Jessica looked at me one more time, and I saw the moment she realized she'd truly lost. There would be no reconciliation, no forgiveness, no carefully managed divorce where she walked away with half of everything. She'd gambled and lost, and now she was going to pay. "I loved you," she whispered. "No," I replied. "You loved what I could give you. There's a difference." She left without another word. After the door closed, I sat down heavily on the couch. The adrenaline that had been carrying me through the confrontation was draining away, leaving exhaustion in its wake. My mother sat beside me and took my hand. "I'm so sorry, sweetheart." "I'm sorry too, Mom." "Sorry this happened. Sorry you lost money. Sorry Marcus turned out to be." "Don't," she said firmly. "Don't apologize for what he did. This isn't on you." Emma hugged me from the other side, and my father gripped my shoulder. We sat like that for a long time, a family smaller by two but somehow feeling more solid than it had in years. Finally, Sharon and Catherine gathered their things to leave. I walked them to the door. "That was brutal," Sharon said quietly. "How are you holding up?" "Ask me in 6 months," I replied. "Right now, I'm just trying to breathe." "For what it's worth, you handled that with more grace than most people could have managed. You have every right to be angry." "Oh, I'm angry," I assured her. "But anger comes later. Right now, I have logistics to handle. Divorce papers to file. A house to reclaim. A life to rebuild." Catherine handed me her card. "Call me if Jessica gives you any trouble, or if your parents decide to press charges against Marcus." I meant what I said about taking elder abuse cases seriously. After they left, I stayed for dinner, my mother insisted, and I didn't have the heart to refuse. We didn't talk about Marcus or Jessica. We talked about Emma's kids, my father's garden, my mother's book club. Normal things. Safe things. As I drove home that night to a house that would soon be mine alone, I felt something unexpected. Relief. The lies were over. The pretending was done. Whatever came next, at least it would be real. Act 4. The confrontation. The divorce proceedings took 3 months, complicated by Jessica's pregnancy and her repeated attempts to claim I was the father despite the Dina evidence. Her lawyer, a court-appointed public defender who looked exhausted, argued that I had a moral obligation to support the child I'd prepared to raise. My lawyer, a woman named Patricia Chen with a reputation for being absolutely merciless, shut that down immediately. My client has no legal or moral obligation to support the biological child of his wife's affair partner. That's not how paternity law works. Jessica tried to claim the house, the cars, my business assets. Patricia produced the prenup, our meticulously organized financial records, and proof that every major asset had been acquired with income I'd earned independently or inherited from my grandmother. Your client signed a legally binding agreement, Patricia told the public defender during a particularly contentious meeting. She violated that agreement by committing adultery. She's entitled to nothing beyond her personal belongings and the car titled in her name. Those are the facts. Jessica was living with her parents, who were horrified by the whole situation but couldn't bring themselves to abandon their pregnant daughter. Her mother called me once, crying, begging me to be reasonable and think of the baby. "I am thinking of the baby," I told her gently. "That baby deserves to be raised by people who don't lie. I wish him or her well, but I can't be involved." "I hope you understand." She'd hung up without another word. Marcus had disappeared. He'd moved out of my parents' guest house and, according to my sister's reconnaissance, was living in a motel on the edge of town. He'd tried to contact my parents twice. Both times, my father had refused to speak to him. My mother had blocked his number after he'd sent a series of rambling text messages about how family should forgive family. "Some things can't be forgiven," my mother had said, deleting the messages. "Not because I'm cruel, but because forgiveness would mean pretending it didn't matter. And it matters." The baby was born in late November. A boy. Jessica's mother posted about it on Facebook. 7 pounds, 3 ounces, healthy and perfect. I didn't look at the pictures. I didn't send a gift. I simply noted the date for my records in case it became legally relevant. Marcus showed up at the hospital, according to Emma, who'd heard from a family friend who'd heard from a nurse. He'd tried to be present for the birth, but Jessica had him removed from the room. Apparently, their relationship had deteriorated after the revelation about Denise. They were fighting about money, specifically The money Marcus didn't have and Jessica desperately needed. It would have been satisfying, except I found I didn't care enough to savor it. They'd destroyed my marriage, but they'd also freed me. I was beginning to understand the difference. The final divorce hearing was in mid-December, 8 months after that terrible family dinner. Jessica didn't show up. She sent her public defender with a letter agreeing to all terms. Patricia said it was the fastest divorce settlement she'd ever processed. She's got nothing left to fight with, Patricia explained as we left the courthouse. No money for legal fees, no leverage, no sympathetic angle. She signed the papers because fighting would have cost her more than surrendering. What about Marcus? I asked. Did my parents press charges? They did. He's been charged with elder financial abuse and theft. He's looking at 2 to 4 years if convicted, and given the evidence Sharon compiled, conviction is almost certain. His court date is in February. I absorbed this information, waiting for some feeling of triumph. It didn't come. Instead, I just felt tired. You won, Patricia said, watching my face. You're allowed to be happy about it. I didn't win. I corrected. I survived. There's a difference. The real confrontation came 3 weeks after the divorce was finalized. I was at my parents' house for my niece's birthday party when Marcus appeared. He looked terrible, thinner, unshaven, wearing clothes that hadn't been washed in days. He came through the back gate, bypassing the front door where he would have been turned away immediately. My father saw him first. Get out. You're not welcome here. I need to talk to David, Marcus said, and his voice cracked. Please, just 5 minutes. You have nothing to say that I want to hear, I replied, standing up from the patio table. Emma moved protectively closer to her children. I'm sorry. Marcus's eyes were red, and I couldn't tell if it was from crying or drinking or both. I'm so sorry, David. I never meant for any of this to happen. You had an affair with my wife for 2 years. You stole from your own brother. You tried to trap me into raising your child. Which part of that happened by accident? I know. It was wrong. But I love her. I love Jessica, and I love my son. I thought we could be together, that it would work out somehow. I wasn't thinking clearly. You weren't thinking at all, my father said coldly. Get out, Marcus. Before I call the police. Wait, I said. And everyone looked at me in surprise. I want to hear this. What exactly do you want, Marcus? I need help. I don't have money for a lawyer, and the court date is coming up. You could ask Mom and Dad not to press charges. You could help me make this right. The audacity of it was almost impressive. Make it right? You want me to help you avoid the consequences of stealing from your family? It wasn't like that. What was it like? My voice was rising now, the anger I'd been suppressing finally breaking through. Tell me, Uncle Marcus. Explain to me how fucking my wife and robbing my parents was somehow justified. I'd love to understand. I was desperate. I had nothing. You have everything. The business, the money, the perfect life. You don't know what it's like to struggle. I built that business from nothing. I worked 18-hour days while you lounged in your guest house. I saved every penny while you spent money you stole. Don't you dare talk to me about struggle. You always thought you were better than me. I am better than you. The words came out louder than I'd intended, and my niece started to cry. Emma picked her up, shooting me an apologetic look. I took a breath, lowered my voice. I'm better than you because I don't lie. I don't cheat. I don't steal from people who love me. That's not arrogance, Marcus. That's just basic human decency. So you won't help me? No, I won't. You're going to face trial. You're probably going to prison. And you know what? You deserve it. Not because I'm vindictive, but because actions have consequences. You spent 2 years teaching me that lesson. Now it's your turn to learn. Marcus looked at my parents, searching for mercy. My mother turned away. My father's expression could have been carved from stone. Get out, my father repeated, and don't come back. You're not my brother anymore. Marcus left, and I watched him go with a curious sense of closure. I'd imagined this confrontation dozens of times, always with some perfect cutting remark or devastating revelation. The reality was simpler and sadder. A broken man facing the consequences of his choices, finding no sympathy because he'd destroyed any right to it. Later that evening, after the party had ended and the kids were in bed, Emma and I sat on the back porch with our parents. "Do you think he'll go to prison?" Emma asked. "Yes," I said. "And honestly, I think he should." "That's harsh, David." "Maybe. But he stole $73,000 from people on fixed incomes. He didn't just hurt me. He hurt Mom and Dad, hurt their retirement, hurt their security. Someone needs to make him understand that's not okay." My mother patted my hand. "Your father and I have talked about it. We're going to follow through with the charges. It's the right thing to do, even if it's difficult." "What about the money?" I asked. "Have you been able to recover any of it?" "Some," my father said. "The lawyer thinks we might get back about 40% through the court system, but it'll take time." I'd already decided what I was going to do, had made the decision weeks ago. "I want to reimburse you. The full $73,000. "David." "No." My mother started, but I held up my hand. "Yes, I can afford it, and you need it. This happened because of my marriage, because I brought Jessica into this family. I can't fix what Marcus did, but I can fix this." "It wasn't your fault," my father said firmly. "You're not responsible for her choices or his." "I know. But I want to do this anyway. Call it a gift. Call it making things right. Call it whatever you want, but please let me help." They argued, but eventually they accepted. I wrote the check the next day, and when I handed it to my father, I saw tears in his eyes. "You're a good man," he said. "Better than I deserved. You deserved better than a son-in-law who didn't notice what was happening in his own marriage, and a brother who stole from you. But I'm working on being better, Dad. Every day, I'm working on it." Act 5. Resolution and Reflection. 6 months later, I stood on the deck of my new office space, watching the city lights begin to twinkle as dusk settled over the downtown core. Chen Design Studios had expanded. I'd hired 3 new designers, a project manager, and a business developer. We'd moved into a sleek co-working space with floor-to-ceiling windows and exposed brick, the kind of office I'd always dreamed of but had been too cautious to commit to. Turns out, the end of my marriage had freed me in unexpected ways. Without Jessica's spending habits and constant demands for a certain lifestyle, I had capital to invest in the business. Without the emotional drain of maintaining a lie, I had energy to pursue bigger clients, bolder projects. We'd landed a contract with a major tech company worth $800,000 over 2 years. I'd been featured in a design magazine article about up-and-coming creative firms to watch. My team was talented, motivated, and most importantly, we trusted each other. My phone buzzed. "Emma, texting, dinner at Mom and Dad's tomorrow. You coming?" "Wouldn't miss it," I replied. Family dinners had become pleasant again, now that the toxic elements had been removed. We laughed, we told stories. My niece had started calling me Uncle Dave the Artist, which delighted my mother to no end. Marcus had been convicted of elder financial abuse and sentenced to 3 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 18 months. I'd received a letter from him last month, rambling and semi-coherent, claiming he'd found God and wanted forgiveness. I'd thrown it away without responding. Some bridges once burned weren't worth rebuilding. Jessica had moved to Oregon to live with her sister, the one who actually existed, and was, ironically, going through a real divorce. She'd posted on social media a few times, pictures of her baby, vague updates about starting over and finding myself. I'd blocked her on all platforms. That chapter of my life was closed, and I had no interest in checking for updates. Patricia had called me last week with interesting news. Jessica had attempted to sue me for child support, claiming that I'd acted as a father figure during her pregnancy and therefore had financial obligations. The judge had dismissed the case in under 10 minutes, calling it frivolous and a waste of the court's time. "She's desperate," Patricia had explained. "Marcus is in prison, she has no income beyond part-time retail work, and raising a baby is expensive. She's grasping at straws. I'd felt something almost like pity, but it passed quickly. Jessica had made her choices. I'd made mine. We were both living with the consequences. The surprises came from unexpected places. A woman named Rachel, a project manager at one of my client companies, had asked me to coffee 3 weeks ago. I'd said yes, cautiously, and we'd talked for 2 hours about design theory, terrible bosses, and our shared love of obscure science fiction novels. She'd asked me to dinner. I'd said yes again. We were taking it slowly. I'd been honest about my recent divorce, the betrayal, my hesitation to trust. She'd listened without judgment and shared her own story of a relationship ended by lies. We were two wounded people learning how to be open again, and there was something comforting in that shared understanding. "I'm not looking for perfect," she'd said over our third dinner. "I'm looking for honest. Can you do honest?" "That's all I know how to do anymore," I'd replied. She'd smiled. "Good. Let's start there." My parents were thriving in unexpected ways. Without the financial burden of supporting Marcus, they'd started traveling again, something they'd given up years ago due to budget constraints. They'd just returned from a cruise to Alaska, full of stories about glaciers and wildlife. "It's like we got our retirement back," my mother had said, showing me approximately 2,000 photographs. We forgot what it was like to not worry about every dollar. The $73,000 I'd reimbursed them had been placed into a high-yield savings account and an investment fund. They'd insisted on putting half of any future inheritance into a trust for Emma's children, saying I'd already been more than generous. I'd protested but eventually accepted their decision. It was their money, their choice. Emma had started graduate school pursuing a degree in counseling. "Watching what you went through," she'd told me over coffee one morning, "it made me realize how much people need support during crisis. I want to help people navigate trauma and betrayal. You helped me navigate it," I'd reminded her. "You were there for every court date, every hard conversation. That's what family does," she'd said simply. The real family, anyway. On weekends, I'd started painting again, something I'd abandoned after college when serious design work took over. I'd converted a spare bedroom in my house into a studio, and I'd spend Sunday mornings with music playing and canvas stretched before me, creating art for no purpose except the joy of creation. Jessica had mocked my painting hobby when we were married. "Why waste time on something that doesn't make money?" she'd asked, looking at the watercolor landscapes I'd hidden in a closet. Now, free from her judgment, I'd rediscovered why I'd fallen in love with art in the first place. It wasn't about profit or productivity. It was about beauty, expression, the simple pleasure of bringing something new into the world. I donated several paintings to a local charity auction. One had sold for $2,800, the money going to a women's shelter. The buyer had contacted me through the auction house, asking if I did commissioned work. I'd politely declined, but recommended several artists I knew who were trying to build their careers. The house had been redecorated, all traces of Jessica removed. I'd repainted walls, replaced furniture, changed the energy of the space from our home to my home. It felt lighter somehow, less burdened by the weight of lies told in every room. I'd turned the nursery, that soft green room I'd painted for a child I'd believed was mine, into a guest bedroom. Emma's kids stayed over sometimes, and hearing their laughter echo through the halls was a better kind of innocence than the one I'd lost. My therapist, Dr. Miranda Lopez, had been instrumental in helping me process everything. She diagnosed me with complex grief, mourning not just the end of my marriage, but the loss of the future I'd envisioned, the trust I'd taken for granted. Betrayal trauma is real, she'd explained during one of our early sessions. You're not just recovering from infidelity. You're recovering from having your reality rewritten, from learning that things you believed to be true were lies. That's a profound loss. We'd worked on trust, boundaries, recognizing red flags. She'd helped me understand that what happened wasn't my fault, that I couldn't have prevented it by being better somehow. Jessica's choices were her own, made for her own reasons that had nothing to do with my worth as a partner. "You're allowed to be angry," Dr. Lopez had said. "You're allowed to feel betrayed and hurt and furious. What you're not allowed to do is let those feelings convince you that you're broken or unlovable. You're neither." It had taken months to believe her, but gradually I'd started to internalize the truth. I was a good person who'd been treated badly. That said everything about Jessica and Marcus and nothing about me. One evening, sitting in my office watching the sunset, I received an unexpected email. It was from Angela Winters, the woman Marcus had dated and stolen from years ago. "Dear David," it read, "I heard about what happened with your family. I wanted you to know that I testified at Marcus's trial about what he did to me. I spent years feeling guilty for not reporting him when it happened to me, thinking if I had, maybe he wouldn't have hurt your parents. Your father's lawyer helped me understand that Marcus's choices aren't my responsibility, just like they aren't yours. I hope you're healing. I hope your family is okay. What you did, exposing him, protecting your parents, standing up for yourself, that was brave. Thank you for breaking the cycle." I read the email 3 times, then wrote back, "Angela, thank you for testifying. Thank you for your bravery too. We're all healing, slowly but surely. I hope you're doing well. You deserved better than what he did to you, and I'm sorry you carried that guilt for so long. Best wishes, David." Small connections, small moments of understanding between people who'd been hurt by the same person. It mattered. Marcus's parole hearing was scheduled for next year. My parents had already written letters to the parole board explaining the impact of his theft on their lives and requesting that he serve his full sentence. I'd written one too, not out of vindictiveness, but out of belief that he needed to fully face the consequences of his actions. "Some people don't change until they have no other choice," Dr. Lopez had said when I told her about the letter. "You're giving him that chance by insisting on accountability." Whether Marcus would use his prison time to genuinely change or simply to plot his next con, I didn't know. It wasn't my responsibility to care. I'd done what I needed to do, protected my family, established boundaries, moved forward. Jessica's son, I couldn't think of him as anything else, certainly not as my nephew or any other family designation, would grow up without knowing me. That was sad in an abstract way, but it was necessary. That child deserved a life free from the complicated mess of his conception, and my presence would have been a constant reminder of betrayal. I hoped he'd be okay. I hoped Jessica would get her life together for his sake, though I had my doubts. I hoped Marcus would eventually meet his son and be a better father than he'd been an uncle or brother. But those were distant hopes for people who were no longer part of my story. My story now was about rebuilding, about trust carefully extended to new people, about family dinners filled with laughter instead of secret resentments, about a business thriving because I'd stopped playing small to make someone else comfortable, about art created for joy and relationships built on honesty. On Friday night, I had dinner with Rachel at a small Italian restaurant downtown. We talked about her daughter's upcoming dance recital, about a hiking trip we were planning for next month, about the book she'd recommended that I'd finally finished. "You seem lighter," she observed over dessert. "When I first met you, you carried so much weight. It's lifting." "It is," I agreed. "Slowly, but it is." "Are you scared?" she asked. "Of trying again, I mean." With us, I considered the question honestly. Sometimes, trusting someone with my heart after what happened, it's terrifying. But staying closed off forever would be worse. So yes, I'm scared. But I'm trying anyway. She reached across the table and took my hand. That's all anyone can do. Try. Be honest. Show up. Hope for the best. Hope for the best, I repeated. I can do that. Driving home that night, I thought about the man I'd been a year ago, believing he was about to become a father, trusting his wife, confident in his place in the world. That man was naive, but he wasn't foolish. He'd loved genuinely. He'd tried his best. The fact that his trust had been betrayed didn't diminish the value of having trusted at all. I thought about Jessica and Marcus, wherever they were now, living with their choices. I didn't hate them anymore. Hate required too much energy, too much continued connection. Instead, I felt a distant sadness for what they'd destroyed, and a deep gratitude for what I'd built from the rubble. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother, "Made your favorite cookies. Come by tomorrow?" "I'll be there," I replied. "Save me the ones with extra chocolate chips. Always, sweetheart. Love you. Love you too, Mom." Simple exchanges, warm and uncomplicated. This was what family was supposed to feel like. Chosen, mutual, honest. We'd lost members, but what remained was stronger for the pruning. The next morning, I sat in my home studio, paintbrush in hand, working on a new piece. It was an abstract landscape, all bold colors and sweeping lines, representing nothing specific but feeling like everything important. Freedom. Possibility. The future unwritten. Through the open window, I heard children playing in the neighborhood park. A dog barked. Someone was mowing their lawn. Ordinary sounds of an ordinary Saturday, the kind of peaceful normalcy I'd once taken for granted. I'd learned the hard way that peace isn't permanent, that trust can be broken, that the people you love most can hurt you deepest. But I'd also learned that survival is possible, that dignity can be maintained, that life continues even after betrayal threatens to end it. A year ago, I'd sat in my office holding a paternity test and feeling like my world had collapsed. In many ways, it had. But from that collapse came an opportunity to rebuild something better, stronger, more authentically mine. I didn't know what the next chapter would bring. More success, probably. The business was on solid footing. Maybe love, if Rachel and I continued to grow together. Definitely more family dinners, more of my niece's artwork on my refrigerator, more of my father's terrible jokes and my mother's excellent cooking. Whatever came, I'd face it as myself, no longer performing the role of devoted husband in a fraudulent marriage, no longer pretending not to see warning signs, no longer accepting less than I deserved out of fear of being alone. I'd been betrayed, lied to, stolen from, and humiliated. But I'd also been resilient, strategic, principled, and ultimately victorious, not over Jessica and Marcus, but over the fear that what they'd done had permanently broken me. They'd taken much, my marriage, my trust, 2 years of my life, my naive belief in happy endings. But they hadn't taken everything. They hadn't taken my integrity, my capacity to love, my relationship with my family, or my ability to build a future worth living. As I added a final brushstroke to the painting, a burst of gold against deep blue, I realized something profound. The best revenge wasn't destroying them. It wasn't watching them suffer or making sure they paid. The best revenge was this: painting on a Saturday morning in a house I owned outright, planning a future with someone who valued honesty, running a successful business built on my own talent, and being genuinely, authentically happy. They'd tried to break me. Instead, they'd freed me. And that, in the end, was the greatest victory of all. Epilogue. Marcus served 18 months and was released on parole. According to Emma, who occasionally checked his social media out of morbid curiosity, he moved to Florida and works at a car dealership. He hasn't contacted the family. We haven't contacted him. Jessica remarried, a man she'd met in a parenting group, apparently, who knew about her past and accepted it. I hoped she'd learned something from everything that happened. I hoped she'd be honest with him. But her life was no longer my concern. My parents celebrated their 45th wedding anniversary with a party attended by 50 friends and family members. They danced to their song just like they had at their wedding, and my mother whispered something in my father's ear that made him laugh. That moment, their joy, their love, their resilience was worth more than any revenge I could have extracted from the people who'd hurt us. Rachel and I got engaged after dating for a year and a half. I proposed on a hiking trail in the mountains. No elaborate plans or expensive rings, just two people who'd learned the hard way that honesty matters more than grand gestures. She said yes, while crying and laughing simultaneously. "You're sure?" I'd asked, suddenly nervous. "You know my history. You know I'm going to be paranoid sometimes, that I'll need reassurance." "David," she'd interrupted, cupping my face in her hands, "I know exactly who you are. That's why I'm saying yes." Chen Design Studios opened a second location in Portland. We hired 12 more people. I gave my first TEDx talk about resilience and creativity after trauma. The business I'd built in Jessica's shadow had become something I was genuinely proud of, but the biggest change was internal. I'd learned to recognize red flags, to trust my instincts, to prioritize honesty over comfort. I'd learned that love without respect was worthless, that loyalty demanded reciprocity, that some betrayals were unforgivable, not because I was unforgiving, but because forgiveness would have required pretending the damage didn't matter. It did matter. It changed me. But it didn't break me. And in the quiet moments, sitting with my family or working in my studio or holding Rachel's hand as we planned our future, I knew I'd survived the worst someone could do to me and emerged as someone I could respect. That was enough. That was everything. Sometimes the world doesn't collapse. Sometimes it just shifts, revealing foundations you didn't know you'd built, foundations strong enough to support you through the fall and the slow, deliberate climb back up. This is what it means to survive betrayal, not to emerge unchanged, but to emerge whole. The ending isn't always what you expected, but if you're lucky, it's better than what you'd lost. And I was finally, incredibly, lucky. The end.